This week on Unplugged Urban,
we're going to see how many ways we can turn this old lumber into something else. Well, it might be hard to tell today, but this week has not been the greatest weather.
no.
It's been raining a lot, and we thought we'd make our best use of our time, since we really couldn't work outdoors, inside the garage, doing some projects.
Reclaimed wood is a great idea, right? And it's very trendy, and it looks really cool if it's something that you like, which we do here and there. We're trying not to do too much because it is a trend. But the problem with that is that if you go and you look, say on Craigslist or something like that in your area for reclaimed wood, you're most likely going to pay a pretty penny for it because people know it's trendy. So they'll pull down old barns or old sheds or fencing.
Just to sell that type of wood.
Just to sell reclaimed wood. Which, if you can afford to do that and that's what you're looking for, then do it rather than go buy brand new wood and try to make it look old.
Another thing,
Just a heads up.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Another thing to keep in mind too is you might say to yourself, well, I'm not really good at woodworking, or I'm not very handy, and that's fine. Something to consider when you're purchasing lumber or when you're purchasing furniture especially, there's a lot of companies that now are starting to make furniture from reclaimed wood. So you can still participate in the use of recycled wood. Same thing with builders too. If you tell a builder that's doing a project in your house, hey, I would like you to go down to, what's the one we have in Portland, the Recyclers? It's part of Habitat for Humanity.
Oh, it is Habitat for Humanity. It's
I think it's
Rebuild?
called yeah, the
Restore?
Restore. We don't know what it's called, but we'll put a link in the description below. There's plenty of local places that you can buy refurbished windows or used windows, used lumber, doors, all sorts of flooring, and it's great because you kind of get it a second life. You're not throwing stuff away, and it has a really great look to it. Now, the other thing you wanted to keep in mind is I would never recommend, and we talked about this on the chicken coop build, using reclaimed lumber for something structural. We don't ever do that. It's usually furniture or like a table, something that is not going to support somebody's weight, basically, other than maybe a chair. It can't, for most part, reclaimed lumber is not going to meet any building codes. So you want to keep that in mind. If you're going to build a house, you're not going to build it out of reclaimed lumber. At least not very likely. And good luck getting your city to sign off on it. They might, but it's going to be a bit of work. You just don't know when you get the lumber. Is there any rot in it? Is there any infestation? That sort of thing. Now, like Danielle said, when we look for lumber, what we typically do is we call somebody we know, we think might have lumber. We also, if we go on Craigslist, the keyword is not to look for reclaimed lumber or recycled lumber, but look for free lumber. Free is the right word, because you're usually finding somebody who just wants it gone. They don't want to deal with it, and maybe they're thinking, I don't really want to put it in a landfill either. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Or they don't want to take it to the dump.
Or
so they want someone else to haul it off their property. You to take care.
Just be careful though. Sometimes I've seen posts where it's like, what was the one? It was free firewood, and then it had a picture of a tree, and it said, "You cut, you haul." It's like, so you just want me to come out and cut your tree for free?
Right.
Well, there's another one I saw that was free lumber, and it showed somebody's fence. You disassemble, you haul. So be careful what you're getting yourself into. If you see a picture of a pile of wood that's like already stacked, that's usually a good sign. If it's a tree or a fence or a barn,
depends on how desperate you are and what you're looking for.
Maybe not such a good idea. So the project that we're working on this week is we are finishing our movie room. What?
Yay! That way the blown-in insulation isn't falling through the ceiling anymore.
It's been one of those projects that takes a lot of reclaimed wood. I mean, it actually has a ton. So you just have to collect for a long amount of time. And so the last thing to do is I had a couple of pieces of the slats to put in, and then I need to make some speaker grills or some speaker mounts effectively to hold the speakers up. They've been in the ceiling kind of, but I needed something that I can make really nice round circles with. So when you're building with reclaimed wood, a lot of times what you need to do is what's called joining, which means cutting them into smaller pieces and then gluing together. I'm going to show you how I do that, and we're going to show you some clips of us finishing putting the movie room together.
Yay!
joining wood together, something to consider is the formation or the geometry of how that wood goes together. Plywood is a really good example of laminated wood, and if you look closely at the edge of plywood, you can actually see that there's several layers together. This one I think has a veneer layer, and then an interior layer, and then probably a particle layer, and then repeats again on the outside. Most plywood is made up of wood scraps and then tree shavings, where they literally shave the outside of the tree to get that veneer look. But plywood is extremely strong. Because you have all these overlapping layers, it's almost like fiberglass or Kevlar. With those layers woven together, they're actually stronger than any one of those layers if it was the same size. Now, when you're joining other wood together, sometimes you don't need the structural strength, like for these speaker mounts. They're not holding a lot of weight, but they do need to have a fairly decent structure. These are some boards that we're making for a shoe rack that we started, and we'll probably have in another episode. And again, they're not going to hold a lot of weight, but they do need to have some decent structure. So if you choose not to overlap them one on top of another, another approach is to offset them. You can see here on this board that all the pieces start and stop at a different spot. By doing that, you're giving more interconnecting. It's kind of like putting your fingers together like this, getting more interconnecting places than if you just put them all in one line of boards that were all the same length. Now on this speaker mount that we made, I just made it out of two pieces because it was fairly simple, but I did add some more surface area to my gluing surface to give it a little more strength. And you can see that here, there's kind of like a Z shape or an L shape, I guess, where I notched out on the bottom and then on the other side, so that not only am I gluing unlike these boards where I'm just gluing the surface area, I'm gluing that edge and then this edge and then this edge and then the bottom edge. So gaining surface area is another great way to add to strength when you're gluing, when you're laminating wood pieces, scrap wood pieces together. You want to come help me today? Something that you may not realize about plants and trees is how they grow. A lot of people have the misconception that you plant a seed in the ground and then the seed uses the nutrients in the dirt to basically grow into a tree. But most of the mass, the vast majority of the mass of any plant is not from the dirt. They do get nutrients from the dirt, they get water, obviously, from the soil, but most of a plant's bulk is carbon. And where does that carbon come from? It comes from CO2. Trees bring in carbon dioxide, they strip off the oxygen, and they string the carbon atoms into these long strands it's called cellulose, that becomes the structure of the tree. They release oxygen, and that's what we breathe. That's why it's so important to not remove trees from the environment, and if you do, to replace those, because we need a constant source of removing CO2 from our environment. So when you look at a tree, this is kind of a cool thing. When you look at a tree, think about all of that carbon that's in that tree. That used to be CO2 gas that was polluting our environment. Another thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that you can also reuse this stuff. Here, this is MDF. This comes from like your IKEA cabinet or some furniture that you probably have in your house. This, I believe, came from a TV cabinet that we've used before. On a previous episode, I made the sign on the chicken coop out of this same material. It was a door, I think. Danielle would like to have a computer stand for her monitor at work, and so she asked me to make one of these. If you're making pretty simple stuff that's not like structural, MDF works pretty good. It's easy to cut, it glues really well. The only thing you gotta think about is these finished edges are not real. They're all veneer. So once you cut through the finished edge, it's gone. So I wanna make sure that whatever the front side of this is going to be, I'm gonna keep the original veneer so that it doesn't look a mess when she gets it. The back of it, it's gonna look like particle board, but the front, I want to use these kinds of edges right here.
Finishing up another day at work and was admiring the shelf that my husband made. Pretty much everywhere I've worked, he's made something custom like this because I end up wanting something that is out of the ordinary and is not a normal size. Down here, my monitor is not a normal size, and he just makes it for me.
Aww.
Well, it's kind of hard to believe that these big guys were just a couple
Girls.
weeks. Good point.
We keep saying, hey guys, and
I know.
they're girls.
It's kind of hard to believe that just a couple of weeks ago, these girls were much, much smaller. They have grown up really big. The water feeder we put in is working great.
Yes.
They've kind of all figured it out, and we actually we had both feeders in there for a while. We had one that we had to clean out all the time. We finally took that out this week because they don't seem to use it anymore. They just
Hey,
use.
Be nice.
You're getting good at pecking. They just use the auto feeder, which is really cool. They also have very long claws, which are not fun.
Talons, I think.
Is that talons? Is that what they call them?
Yes, I think they're
Yeah.
talons.
I'll put my leg down there, but she'll like grab, and there we go. Well, our life hack this week was using recycled wood. And so, as always, we're going to pull out the hack-o-meter and give it a score. Healthy gets a 2. Although reclaimed wood is beneficial for the environment, there aren't many direct health benefits, other than the social aspect of meeting some weird people on Craigslist that want you to cut down their tree or move their fence for free.
Affordable? Well, that completely depends on your source for wood. For us, we're giving it an 8 because our lumber was free. It's a huge savings on our project costs. And if you have animals, the scrap wood chips make for great bedding.
Clean gets a 9. CO2 makes up more than 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Retaining and adding to the Earth's tree population is the most effective method of removing CO2 from the atmosphere.
Simple gets a 4 for us. There are usually extra steps when using reclaimed lumber, like sizing or joining, that are not necessary when you buy exactly the sizes that you need of store-bought lumber. Although it may take a little extra time, the environment will be better off, and the end result will have a lot more character and a great story to tell.
Thanks again for joining us this week. We are glad to have you along with us. If you like this video, make sure to click that like button. If you want to see more of these videos, hit the subscribe, click that bell so you get notifications. And another thing that's changed is Minnie we had to tell her not to chase the chickens. and now she's kind of getting chased by the chickens. She has stayed the same size, unfortunately, and the chickens have gotten much bigger, so she's a little more scared of those. Anyway, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Bye.